Welcome to Return to Office. Is it the right move for you and your organization? I am Josh Hoganson, super happy to be here with you today, returning to Leadership Edge Live's live as monthly sessions. It's been a little bit since I've been here, and I'm so happy to be back. Today, the discussion is all about returning to the office from a decentralized or remote setting. Is that right for your organization, your group, your crew, your team? That's going to be our conversation today. Look, a couple of thumbs up. Thank goodness you can hear me now. I was a little bit worried. All right, the very first question I have for you, please answer over in the chat. The question is, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? That's right. Do you want to return to the office? That's the question. Hey, daddy's got to go to work. Let me know over in the group chat. If you're currently working remotely, do you want to return to a brick and mortar or a centralized work location? Let me know. Alrighty. So, yes, in moderation some days, but not 5 days a week. That seems like a lot, right? So, some of us are kind of on the fence. We like the idea maybe of getting back into the office and working with people face to face or directly, at least part of the time. Yeah, it looks like pretty much sometimes is the answer. Well, I've got a couple of quick questions for you in my gym shorts most days. I got a couple of quick questions for you. Now, for those of you who've seen a QR code, you already know what you're doing. But for those of you who haven't, please pull out your phone, turn on your camera, point your camera directly at this QR code, and a little link is going to pop up. Tap on that link if you would, and then go ahead and enter the PIN number 981529 and take a couple of minutes to just answer quickly the questions that are going to pop up for you. And these are just questions about, are you currently working in a remote setting, and those kinds of things. So please jump on in there, take the test, and I'll go ahead and see if I can't get any music going for you or something to listen to while we're waiting. Let's see if we can make that happen. We'll give you about a minute to work through this for sure. Definitely want everybody to jump in and give us their thoughts and ideas. Starting to get some responses. Keep working through it. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Now, if you're still working through it, that's perfectly okay. Keep filling that information now. But our very first question there, what percentage of your team or organization currently is working remotely? We'll give this sucker a refresh and see how we're looking. Looks like the majority of us has most or all of our team working remotely, where we have very few people at only about a quarter or 50% of the organization is out working remotely. And then a couple more that it's about 50 or a little bit more than 50%. Now, this is something that's important to consider when we're talking about returning to work. What is the impact on my most important asset, my human asset, or my human resource? The next question that we're going to take a peek at is going to be, why is your organization currently working remotely? That just popped up in front of me, but much to like I believe that back in 2020, that pandemic or COVID really drove a lot of organizations to move to a remote work environment. Some of us don't know. Some of us expanded our talent pool. They were looking for folks and couldn't find the right people locally, so they're looking all over the place. Some it just happened naturally. That happens a lot with small organizations as they grow. They don't really have a brick and mortar, so they continue to grow. And eventually it's like, well, maybe we should consider moving. So great responses there. Let's take a look at the next one. What is your biggest challenge? I feel like I know what we're going to see here, but communication, teamwork, sense of connection, getting to know each other. Time zones, that's a big one, right? You're managing people in three different time zones. Serendipity of the water cooler. Who doesn't love being able to stop by the water cooler and have a chat? Now, at home, my water cooler's in the kitchen, and I've got a 7-pound toy schnauzer that I get to talk to every now and then when I go out there. So I get it. The serendipity of the water cooler, collaboration, team building. It looks a lot like communication and working with other folks. The next one here, what is the greatest benefit of working remotely? Flexible schedules for sure, no commuting, flexibility of time, a bigger talent pool, dollar bills. I see those right there, those dollar bills indeed. The flexibility of time, schedule. Our employees love it. It causes greater satisfaction for sure. Okay. And then the last question here, why are you thinking about going back to a centralized location, going back in the office? I've got a change in culture, maybe an increase in productivity and NA. Maybe we're not really thinking about it. Feels right. We're paying for a lease. We're already spending the money, creating better business relationships, team dynamics, and we're just not doing it right now. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time. That really gives us an idea of what we're looking at and why we're all here. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons when it comes to returning to a centralized work location. So we've got improved collaboration as a pro, right? We can make faster decisions, and ultimately we make decisions just as fast, but it has a little bit to do with, do we have all of the principal assets available to make the decisions that we need? Oftentimes, if you're in a centralized location, you can pull everybody into a conference room, hash out an issue, and make a decision right there. Where sometimes it's hard to get everybody together remotely to make sure that we've got all of our schedules aligned and we get everybody into a virtual meeting room. For some reason, it's much harder to get into a virtual meeting room together sometimes. All right, spontaneous interactions. Now, this is something that really doesn't happen at all if you're working remotely, unless you're in a meeting and you go way off range and start talking about something that maybe the meeting wasn't meant for, but it's that spontaneous water cooler discussion. You get together and you're chatting with somebody, and then all of a sudden an idea pops, a great idea, a business changing idea, and you can actually start talking through it spontaneously. It pops up. Then finally, clearer communication. And I want to preface this by saying you can have great collaboration in a remote environment as well as in a centralized environment. But when we talk about clear communication, a significant portion of interpersonal communication and the message we deliver and receive is based off of body language. Now, it's kind of hard to see body language if we're working remotely. And oftentimes, even if we're on camera, we can see from here up, right? You have no idea if I'm tapping my foot or my knee is bouncing. That could be a significant sign of stress or impatience, those kinds of things. I'm pretty sure my knee's not bouncing, but it's that kind of stuff. So, clear communication, oftentimes, if we were in the same room or located in the same place as somebody, we can get more of a message by seeing what's happening. Now, a con, and please note that these cons don't relate directly to the pro over here. It's just we're going to talk pros and cons as we go through pages. Attrition or disengagement. Losing top talent. Lots of you said that a big part of working remotely is that you wanted to expand your talent pool. You wanted to look in places outside of maybe your metropolitan area, in a metropolitan area to find talent. And if you return to a brick and mortar setting, you've got options. They need to come to where the brick and mortar is going to be, or you may lose them as talent, right? And so that could be a challenging issue, attrition, if we choose to return to the office. Additionally, there could be a drop in morale. Like many folks that we have on this call right now, we talked about some of us kind of maybe you want to return a day or two, maybe a hybrid setting really feels good to us. But if we do a full fledged return to office, even the folks on this call didn't commit to, oh, that's absolutely what they want. Maybe 3 days, right? Maybe 3 days in, 2 days out, something like that. So we could see an impact to employee morale if we call for a return to the office. A couple other ones: cohesion and culture. Now, returning to the office is unquestionably going to help your teams bond a little bit more. If you spend 8, 9, 10 hours in an office with somebody every day, you are bound to really become more cohesive. I was talking with my peers in my current organization, and I've been here for just over almost 2.5 years, right? So at most, we meet once a month, right? Which means over 2.5 years, I've had about 30 times where I've hung out in the same room with my leader, with my peers, with other people in the organization. Now, in the same 2.5 years, if I was in a centralized location, you would take that 30 times that we've gotten together and multiply it by exponentially, right? Probably around 600 times I would have been in the same room for a 10-hour day with these folks, which leads to bonding, right? Reinforcing company values. Now, company values can be reinforced by documentation, by sending things out, by having conversations remotely, but being able to see people live and breathe in a company value, looking across the workplace and saying, "Oh, I can see that my peer Colleen is currently working in company value, doing this, or my peer Jonathan did this specific task, and boy, that really rings of how we work in this organization." So, being able to see that is significant. And then finally, mentoring and learning. Some of my best learning experiences has just been sitting down next to somebody as they work or they watch me work and just talking through how it is that we find success in what it is that we do. That side by side, real time on the job training. And that's really hard to do in a decentralized workplace. Now, you can do that. You can go over to their house or they can come over to your house, but you still have to be in the same area to make that happen. More cons then. Reputational risk. Now, media backlash. If you're a large organization, and I've seen it in the news myself, you will see news flashes like Amazon returns all of their employees to a centralized location, and then people automatically create an opinion about that, good or bad. And sometimes they go, "Oh, bad. Why would they do that? I don't understand. That's just mean," right? So you can find this media backlash if you return. And then secondarily are industry norms, right? Is it normal for your industry now in today's day and age to work remotely? And if you choose to go against an industry norm within the industry, they'd be like, "Oh, you don't want to work at Josh's widgets and stuff because he makes you go to the office." And I would rather work at Jennifer's widgets and stuff because Jennifer doesn't make you go to the office every day. So a reputational risk there. Let's carry on and keep talking about it. More pros: increased productivity, fewer distractions if you're in a centralized work location. And I talked about this with some of my peers. Tell me about, let's talk about this fewer distractions things. I want to make sure it makes sense because in the office, I get distracted all the time. And I think that the difference that we see here is that in office distractions, although not 100%, continue to move the needle towards productivity. About 50% of the time, move the needle toward productivity. That distraction is a workplace distraction. Let's get something done. Whereas at home, it's I've got to let the dog out, or the gardeners are blowing the leaf blowers outside, or the Amazon truck just pulled up and my dogs are barking. All of these kinds of things can happen at home. So we get increased productivity due to fewer in home distractions and better access to resources. I don't know about you, but I don't have the HP 250 Smart Hub printing, faxing, and emailing center in my office where I can go and collate 138 participant guides stapled and hole punched and all of that stuff to deliver. No, I just don't have that. It's not something that I want to pay for in my house. The other thing I don't have is a closet full of highlighters and post-it notes. Um, page protectors. God, I love page protectors. Those are awesome. I don't have these things in my home, right? So oftentimes, if we're in a centralized location, we've got resources available. Now, another con, people could get resentful or push back if we ask them to return to the office. I don't want it. I'm not going to do it. You can make me return to the office, but all that extra time I give you working at home, you're going to lose that because I'm going to be commuting. There's no way, right? There's no way. I would normally just wake up and log in and start working. Now you're going to lose that commuting time for sure. It's not going to happen. Or internal, I should get some more. I probably have some page protectors around here. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. Or internal politics, right? If you don't do 100% return to work, and you've got Joe's team over here is still working in hybrid or remotely, but you have returned your group or your organization, your department, as opposed to the entire enterprise, then it can cause issues in that means as well. Well, that's it. I'm going to transfer over to Josh's team because they get to stay at home and wear their basketball shorts with Sean. I think that's who said they were wearing basketball shorts. Yep. All right. More pros, visibility and accountability, performance management. It is so easy to see how your crew is doing and who is doing what. If you are in the same location, you have an opportunity to walk around the workspace, observe people work. Super easy to identify performance. The other thing is engagement and monitoring. Are people engaged? Now, they don't happen a whole lot anymore, but when I first started working remotely, we had things like auto clickers on our mouse that would auto click, right? Click, 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 click. So it looked like we never got up and walked away from our computers. Now, I would never do that. Right? And there are still auto clickers. But so, right? We don't need to deal with that if we're in a centralized workplace. We can look over and go, hey, Josh isn't that his, anybody seen Josh around? See, Josh, see, right? We can tell right away if somebody's in the workplace or not. A con, operational disruption. Operationally, it takes work to get people from working remotely to centralized. There are logistics. Is the office set up? Do we need more desks? Do we have enough desks? Is the technology that they're currently using in their home workspace compatible to work in the office workspace? Does everybody have a chair around here? Right? All of the logistics that comes to bringing people in. And then secondarily is the people impact. And we talked about it a little bit, but what is their commute, right? Are they even in the metro area? Are they within a commutable distance of where it is that we live? And they've already set up their life to include things like being able to pick up and drop off their children at work, or taking care of their parents, or watering their plants on a regular schedule. Who knows what it is, but there are people that we're dealing with. And are they going to be able to deal with the impact of returning to it? And are we giving them enough leeway or head time to make the arrangements they need in their personal life to make sure that it works okay, that it goes all right? A couple of more slides here. Perception. Now, this is a hard one to figure out, but if you have a brick and mortar, a centralized location, it can really increase your professional image. Lots of clients and stakeholders like to know that there is something tangible, physical. There's a physical, tangible organization with a door that you can open and walk into if there are issues and say, hey, I've got issues, or hey, I just wanted to stop by and meet the crew, these kinds of things. So a brick and mortar can add an aspect of professional image that we maybe don't really think about. The other thing is hosting opportunities. If you have a centralized location, you can actually host clients and stakeholders for things like totally awesome barbecues. Maybe my boss is listening. Maybe he'll hold a barbecue for me. It's possible. You never know, right? That's the other thing, though. You could actually host events for your employees too. Give them an opportunity to come on site and do a little bit of hanging out and those kinds of things, even if they're in like a hybrid model. But hosting also gives you an opportunity for like team builders and those kinds of things. What is the idealness between top-down return to office mandates and manager discretion? That's a great question. And honestly, it really depends on your organization, Julia. But first off, thank you so much for digging in there. And I would say that there isn't necessarily, well, let's talk first. If it's a top down return to office mandate, right, and that decision is a non-negotiable mandate, there's not a whole lot that we can do. Or if it's at manager level discretion, I think that personally it should be based on the job function, the functionality. So you need to take in, well, all of these slides that we're talking about. Is the functionality there? Can you maintain productivity? Right? Is it best served for the employee? Is it helpful to be able to bring folks in from a larger talent pool? All of these things we have to ask ourselves. But I think an organization should do what's best considering all of these things. So we need to take into consideration uh, all of these things, and things that we haven't talked about yet, like return on investment, right? Does it make sense to have a brick and mortar? Or does it eat so much into our profit that we can't get there? I don't know that there is a balance between, all right, the entire organization has to be centralized, or we should manage it on individual team levels. I think that that's a conversation really that you have internally, and you take into account all of these things to make sure that you're making the right decision for team, for department, for organization, for enterprise, all of those things. So, um, it depends on your organization, I guess, would be my short answer, Julia. Really depends on your organization, what is best and how to move forward. But these are all things we're talking about today that you should take into consideration when going through it. Um, Another con, sorry, on this page is equity concerns. And this is a return to office can be inequitable for your employees, right? It can be for half of your employees, perfectly okay. I've got nothing going on outside of work. I'm just going to go to the office. No big deal. However, you can have people with personal obligations that it becomes a whole lot more challenging to childcare, elderly care, um, second jobs, if that's something that you allow or that they do. It could have to do with the scheduling and the schedule that they work, all of these things. So it can be inequitable to say everybody in the organization has to return to the office because it'll impact people differently. Pros and cons alignment. It is a whole lot easier to strategically align and get everybody in the room and come to agreements if we're together. It can also be a whole lot easier to go through significant SOPs or standard operating procedure changes, change management, because you can stand there and watch the process happen. Oftentimes, change management in a remote environment happens a whole lot slower because you can't monitor to ensure that the new process is being used, maybe with the exception of setting some technology measurements in place to ensure that that's what's happening. But then there's an increased cost. Julie, here's one of the things that I was talking about, identifying the return on investment. A con to moving to a centralized work location can be a cost benefit situation. So another thing you have to consider is bringing our employees back into the office cost effective, or is it eating so much into our profit that it doesn't make sense? Additionally, who do we want in a centralized location if you're only doing a portion of an organization? When both, I think we're all aware that in organizations there's several different kinds of groups. There are cost centers. Organizations are a group of people who don't really generate income; they just keep the business moving. And then we have income groups, right, that actually generate income. And where do we place these folks? And should we even take that into an account? So making sure that as we bring folks in, we are getting a return from our investment. We're getting an increased productivity point that makes sense to bring them into the office in the first place. I think I've got one more. I have one more. That's it. Security and compliance. Some of us work in industries where we are either personally or locally or federally regulated with what we need to do with our data and our information. Um, so we want to and that's really, as we bring people into a centralized location, we can identify where we're storing our data, where we're keeping our information. I worked in an industry that for years and years and years, where for physical paper documents, some of them we were required by federal law to keep on file for a year or 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. And a decentralized location, I can only imagine where some of these documents would be kept, stashed under the desk. Maybe they're propping up their kitty tree with a couple of documents, those kinds of things. Or you have to have very strict and monitored processes to get these documents from centralized location to decentralized and back to centralized. So a centralized location really helps us with security and compliance. And then finally, the logistic complexity, right? Are we moving everybody? Are we doing a hybrid? Um, are we moving everybody or just departments? Are we doing a full return to work or just hybrid? All of these kinds of things. Michael asked the questions: what would be some of the early signs that a return to office strategy is actually working? Right. So the things that I would monitor in the first or the fledgling stages of a return to office strategy are going to be exactly what we talked about. Do we have the logistics in place, the infrastructure? Do we have the desks, the space, the technology, the support function to make sure that we've got all of these folks here? Do we have the servers and the cables running to move that much information in and out of an office? That'd be the first thing I measure. The second thing I would keep a very close eye on are our procedures translatable from a decentralized to a centralized location. So, are the things that we were doing in a decentralized place make sense in a centralized place? Um, and then I would get my fingers on the pulse of the employee satisfaction and how we're working. And as I do it, I would continue to champion vision, mission, and goals to ensure that we do everything to keep morale up. Like Sean says, a pilot might be a slippery slope if there's some resistance to those kinds of things. It's kind of hard to turn back around on those things, especially once we've done things like signed a lease and those kinds of things. Um, so I think that as we consider, do we do it all at once in a pilot or jumping all in at once? What do we do there? I would say once you've committed to returning into the office in whatever means or mode that looks for you, whether it's a team, a department, and the entire organization. Once you've made a commitment to that, stick to that commitment. And I'm not saying you have to, if you've got 500 people working remotely, that you have to pull them all in at once. You can do it in a staged setting where we're going to move 20 people at a time, because logistically, that's how many desks we can get set up and get people here comfortably. And the buildup will allow us from an infrastructure standpoint to be able to get people in here. But once you've committed to moving 20, continue down the road, I would think, unless you run into a world changing or a devastating issue where you go, this is absolutely not going to work for us. But yeah, a pilot, I think, might be dangerous, a dangerous prospect, because then it affords your employees the opportunity to go, well, why are we even piloting it if we don't know the benefit of it in the first place? I think it's a little bit different than piloting like a project, like a big SOP change or something like that. It's probably easier to move out of those things. But my thought, ultimately, it's up to you to review the information, the data that you have in front of you, and make those decisions. Ultimately, it comes down to, in my mind, just a couple of things. Understanding the benefits as well as the challenges of moving to a centralized work location is key to determining your work strategy. And understanding why you moved to a remote environment in the first place really helps you to understand what's best for your organization. If if it's a canned response, like, well, we moved because of the pandemic, or we moved, because everybody else was doing it. It's not necessarily the answer. It's got to be a compelling reason to keep your organization in that state, and understanding the benefits of, what if we change that state? What does it look like? I want to thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I truly appreciate you. I had a really good time. I'm available on LinkedIn. I'm also available at leadershipedge.live. If you want to continue the conversation with me or anybody else here at Leadership Edge Live, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to have a chat with you for sure. I do believe that my buddy here is going to, there we go, post in here a way to book a meeting with me or any of our other assets or development pros here at Leadership Edge Live. But I appreciate you. I want to thank you for your time. I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope to see you very soon, whether it's in our next session or maybe in a meeting. All right, thanks. We'll talk to you later. Bye.